Yeah. So about Fuel Injected, this is the real story, man. Because let me a little background. We formed Swollen Members in 1995, and it just became apparent to me that I thought Mad and Prev would make a better duo on their own. So we kept the Battle Axe crew going. I stayed doing shows with them, but just as a solo artist. But in 2001, in September, I remember they invited me to a studio session. They said, yo, we got a track that maybe you could do a little bit of like a chorus, like a singing chorus or something. I went in there to the studio, heard the track. It just, I don't know, it just came out. Like I nailed my parts in about 15 minutes. I'm not exaggerating. It really was that quick. And I went home knowing that if our management sent out this track, everything could change overnight. And that's exactly what happened. They sent it to a couple local radio stations, rock stations, mind you, who started playing it before the thing was even officially released. And it just took off. That song, Fuel Injected, got us our new record deal with Network Records. It solidified a management deal. Everything just changed overnight. In a few weeks' time from that, we were out on the road on a tour with Biff Naked. And it was just wild, like the change. And I knew it. As soon as we did the song, I just something, not from an ego or a cocky place, but it was just we filled a void that hadn't really existed yet. Bringing melody into rap where only a few people had done that before, like Nate Dogg or a group like Freestyle Fellowship. But we just got lucky and it became a runaway pop smash, if you will.
Right, yeah. Yeah, and you know, like you're saying, like you guys were breaking ground and you know, like bringing in some stuff like that wasn't there. And you know, I'm just wondering, like, were you looking at like yourselves as kind of like as Canadian rappers, Canadian artists? Were you guys looking at breaking ground that way, or did you kind of have like even bigger kind of ideas about yourself? Did you know that you was gonna like kind of break out of that?
I was always hesitant to try to be pigeonholed into a Canadian scene type of box. In fact, we really got our start in America. That's who embraced us. From the early 90s, me and Prevail moved to San Diego, met a whole lot of people because we had a tough time even breaking into Vancouver at that time. And when we got back from San Diego, well, I mean, we kept going back and forth, but spending time in Vancouver again, we started to put out some records, some vinyl and stuff, and those took off in America. Like I have to say, America really gave us our start before Canada started to embrace us. And they really didn't embrace us in a big way until the Swollen Members' first Juno win for the song Lady Venom, and then the Fuel Injected. And then Canada became familiar with the grace of support from Much Music, Music Television, MTV, and all that. But prior to that, we were always very underground and content with being an underground success in other places in the world.
Right. And you were speaking about the kind of like the explosion of like Fuel Injection and just how that changed stuff. Like what was it like transitioning from like the live performances that you were doing before that to like once this explodes and you like what was that transition like?
It felt like the same thing because we tried to be authentic with our energy, and we were also involved in the skateboard community, right? Still am. Yeah. To this, I still skate personally.
I saw the tat there. Skate tat.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Skull skates. I have a board on Skull Skates, actually a guest board. A skateboard on Skull Skate skateboards, but that's beside the point. I'm just saying that we tried to keep the energy authentic, like the same as it was always, but being in literal physical bigger arenas, we had to step our game up a little bit and shave off some of the rough edges a little bit. We had to be smart as businessmen, but not to the extent where people could accuse us of selling out. Right. It's a very funny balance.
Right, exactly, right. Yeah, you're adapting to the situation, right? Yeah. Right.
I think we did a good job of it at the time. I don't feel like we lost our former fan base, you know?
Right, yeah, and I think a lot of people kind of have that misconception sometimes where they see people progressing or advancing in music and taking a more melodic approach, and they're like, "Oh, that's not real hip hop." But it's like, no, that's a part of it. Music can sound good and be dope and still have good lyricism. I think you guys are a great example of that. So obviously, we're sitting here celebrating hip hop 50 years within this shit. What does it mean to be a part of this and to be recognized in Vancouver for the impact that you've made?
Until recently, I haven't really thought about it very much.
Right.
I just kind of keep a low profile. I do my own stuff. I release my albums. I tour around the world where I need to, and I don't know. As you get older, like I'm actually turning 50 this year, so that's crazy. Like the hip hop's 50, you know what I mean? And even that's kind of an argument within itself. People have debated that hotly for a minute, but yeah, to be honest, it wasn't until recently when I started seeing these hip hop is 50 celebrations happening that's my man. Yeah. That's what you got. Yeah. 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 It wasn't until recently when I started seeing all these hip hop is 50 celebrations happening that it dawned on me that this actually is something important. Like I said, I'm kind of lost in my own world most of the time. So now it's given me some stuff to think about. I haven't come to any real conclusion other than the fact I'm really happy to be considered any part of what's happened, you know what I mean? I look back at my career and I'm content. In some ways, I wish I had done more things or expanded more, did certain things a different way, but it's too late to have regrets, right? You just got to take it from this point forward. And I don't know what that has to do with it. I'm just rambling, man. But
no, I think it was kind of a broad question, so I think that kind of fits what I was asking. But yeah, so were you guys, were you in Prevail like looking up to the Rascals, or were you guys kind of like peers at that time? Like, what was that kind of relationship like?
We didn't have a good relationship with the Rascals in the '90s, but on both our behalfs, I like to say that it was childhood, teenage and young ego, right. Basically. They had already established some point their place as an underground group. I'm talking early 90s. Right. Me and Prevail moved here from Vancouver, Victoria, and of course the locals who are already on are going to be like, well, who the fuck do these guys think they are, trying to ride on us? And really that's what we were doing. We were trying to make a dent, and we were trying to just be noticed. Yeah. We were trying to get people's attention. Right, Trey?
Max, it's amazing to hear you say this shit.
But that's exactly what we were doing. We were kind of throwing barbs at those guys in what we thought was a healthy, competitive way. Yeah. And maybe they didn't really take it that far. Like, we had some battles. We had some beef. It almost came to fists a number of times. But over time, you grow up, and I always thought their stuff really was good. And looking back now, I listen to it and I'm like, holy shit, they really were polished at what they did. And an absolute fundamental piece of the puzzle in hip hop in Canada and in the world.
Yeah, well, I think like that's just a testament, right, to the competitive nature that hip hop has fostered, and I think like it's honestly been the thing that pushes it forward and continues to like have people like relentlessly pursue kind of like mastery of it, and that allows them to push it forward. I
just want to add to that. I mean, yeah, for any of the younger MCs, rappers coming out, what you said kind of strikes a chord with me. When I see artists really try to master what they're doing, my respect level goes up so much, rather than just being new to the game and even having success. That just having success is worthy of respect for sure, but somebody that studies the craft, understands the history, that just makes my admiration that much stronger.
Right, and like like you're talking about being an outsider from the island coming to Vancouver, being the boxing in of being a Canadian rapper, like it's kind of been like an uphill battle, right? Like you've been facing like kind of like odds that wouldn't like really kind of work out in on paper, but you guys have been relentless in pursuing like a spot in this. So what can you say to the underdogs and the people out there that needs some fire lit under them?
Well, that's a funny thing because it's like the fire is either there or it's not. People can get inspired from other artists, and that's all great, or inspired by the game in general. But it's kind of, if your drive is there, you're going to make it no matter what type of adversity you face. You have to absolutely love it.
Is that how you felt back then?
Yeah.
Like you just knew.
From day one when I first started doing raps in the late 80s, I knew it was viable. I didn't really have a lot of people telling me that I couldn't do it, being from a small town on Vancouver Island. I don't know. Maybe that was stubborn or like a undersight on my part, but I looked at groups like De La Soul, for instance, or even Public Enemy or EPMD. They're from the suburbs in New York on Long Island. And I figured in my head, if they could be from an island with suburbs and all that, then why can't we? It just made sense. And I always felt like we had something to offer.
Yeah. No, totally. I know there's kind of like maybe a misconception that like hip hop is all like just like gangster or thug or whatever, and like there's an outside perception of like, oh, if you don't fit in that mold, then you're not a rapper or whatever. But there's so many people like you're bringing up, like De La Soul and Public Enemy, and especially like in the late 80s, right? Like it was such and like just the native tongue movement, that whole thing, right?
Everything for us.
Right. Yeah, so that was like where you guys were getting inspiration and that.
Yeah, De La Soul, Jungle Brothers, Tribe Called Quest, Queen Latifah, Moni Love, Black Sheep when they came out. But even prior to that, it was like KRS-One from Boogie Down Productions, Digital Underground, kind of like the oddballs in rap, you know what I mean? But at the same time, I was always the biggest Eazy-E fan and loved EPMD, and you kind of got to love it all. And back then it was okay. Rap is such a minority within the music industry anyway. So we would check for everybody. But there's certain individuals, certain groups that re-identify with even more. And then when we saw groups like Souls of Mischief and Hieroglyphics come out, we were already like well into doing our thing, and Del the Funky Homo Sapien. So then it started to feel like we really had peers, because those guys also, being from
West Coast,
Oakland, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, it just made it that much more identifiable. And peace to those guys, because they're one of the first West Coast U.S. crews to really show us some love. And we've done lots of different collaborations and tours and stuff since the 90s. And that's all thanks to Del. He kind of opened that door.
Yeah, man. Yeah, no, they've definitely done a lot for West Coast cats that want to rap like East Coast rappers. You know what I mean?
And that was us. We were really inspired by the East Coast. I love the West Coast stuff. You could never tell me Ice-T was not the shit.
No.
Fucking loved him. Pardon the language.
No.
Okay. Shit. Fuck. Pussy. Dick.
Hip-hop, baby.
Yeah. Hip hop. Yeah. Labia.
Yeah. No. It's there. And you know what? We just like had Prevail talking about freestyling and ciphering, and was that also something that you were working on? Were you freestyling back in those days when you were on the
That was the number one thing. I'm gonna tell you a little story actually. When I first got with Prev, maybe around 1990 or something, I just knew him from the neighborhood and from some of my friends went to the same high school as him. We were introduced, and I knew that he had just started to rap. He knew that I rap. And we just became fast friends. And I remember one time walking to my parents' house, we were kicking each other all the raps that we had written. It's like, hey, check this one out. I'd spit a rap, and he'd like, oh, that's dope. Check this one out. And we ran out of raps halfway to my parents' house, and we just started going off the head.
Right, yeah.
And it seemed really easy.
Right.
And I don't know, we didn't think about it too much because we thought ignorantly that every rapper could freestyle off the top of the head. This is back in 1990, right? And us having not traveled really much at that point, we were none the wiser. So we just kept freestyling a lot. In fact, when me and Prev formed the group Split Sphere, which is kind of why we're here tonight, that was our thing. We never released any of the material that me and him did together as a duo. We became known as the freestyle guys everywhere we went. Guys hated us here because of that shit. We freestyling up a storm. It was crazy.
I know, because if you're battling a cat, right, and you just start like picking apart what he's wearing, like in the moment, right, and he's like fucking got the busted ass Pumas on, and you start roasting that, it's like you can't beat that. Not with those generic like.
And we weren't really. I mean, at least I wasn't really on the battle tip. I just wanted to be like supreme, right? Prev was a little more competitive, and he got me more into the battling thing. So I've definitely had some battles. I think the only battle I ever lost was against Prev.
Oh fuck! Okay.
And Friendly Fire. It was one night, actually in Victoria. I had a show, and I invited him on stage, and he just started going at me, like just on some friendly stuff. I was a little mad after, but at the same time, I had to respect it. Like, it was sparring, and we'd done sparring before, and he got me that night. You know, I've probably got him other times, but that was one that, I don't know, maybe he was trying to help me keep my ego in check. I don't know what it was. We never really talked about it, but I'll never forget it.
Yo, I think tonight, revenge, man. Get him up there.
The feelings change. The idea of competition, it does evolve. And me personally, I don't really feel like that. I want to be as good as I can be. That's why I'm still recording and dropping albums. But the whole idea, I don't feel the air of competition anymore. Like, I do accept that I feel I have a place in this that I've earned. And that's not to say I can start being lazy. But my desire is not to go after cats trying to battle them. I just want to maintain where I'm at and even still try to take it further.
Yeah, well, that being said, man, like, yeah, you obviously have earned a lot of respect and a spot within this, you know, scene and within this industry, and you guys have, you know, left a legacy that, you know, deserves to be recognized and celebrated in places like this. So, you know, it's hip-hop 50 years, Prevail and Moka Only, representing Split Sphere tonight with the Rascals. I hope you guys have been able to make relations.
Fuck yeah, I love those guys.
Yeah.
I figured. Yeah. Oh, it's all love. Like, seriously. Like, yeah, I have nothing but admiration and respect because, you know, they made it easier for us to come out in the 90s. The funny thing is, when they signed their first deal, me and Prev were signing a deal at the exact same time. We ended up not signing it after taking the paper to a lawyer and having them look it over. And sometimes I regret because we would have had an album come out at exactly the same time as Rascals. But, you know, I think we learned something.
Might have had an album that came out, but might have lost your publishing at the same time, right? How did you even know to go to a lawyer at that time? Like,
our producer at the time, whose name was Judd Skinner, rest in peace. I just found out he passed away recently. And he's the only guy who had access to me and Prev's original EP. So that's lost. I don't know where that is. But he was an older guy. He was a few years older, and it was his idea to do that, to want to make sure the thing was kosher.
right. Yeah, no, that probably saved you guys a lot of fucking headaches in the future, right? But here we are, man. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Still got that fire and passion. It's awesome. Yeah. Absolutely. Is there anything else you want to say to the people? You said you're still recording, still working on stuff. What should we look out for?
Okay, the latest album just came out a couple months ago. It's called In and of Itself on Urbnet Records. The reception's been really, really crazy, better than I can expect. As last time I checked, I think it was sitting at number 14 in the U.S. charts for hip-hop, and around 5 in Canada. So that's great, and I'm happy with the reception of that. I'll be dropping the instrumental version of that in September, And then in October, I have a Halloween instrumental album coming out called Spooky Beats and Other Treats. Yeah. There's lots of stuff coming. Lots of stuff is coming, yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much for your time. It's been a pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to be here with you, man. Absolutely. Icon Hip Hop. Peace out.